Speaking of upsides, we've had a lot of discussion about all your projects. Look, Bangemall was something that we talked about. We said, look, here's the thing, and by the time you guys get there, you've let out a few announcements. Fantastic story, I feel. Tell us about it.
Yes, Bangemall's a really interesting one. I guess to step back a bit, the Bangemall Basin is part of what they call the Capricorn Origin. And the Capricorn Origin is a belt of rocks that sits in between the Yilgarn, where the goldfields are, and the Pilbara. And it's Proterozoic, so it's a younger age. And it's this belt of rocks, of sedimentary units and granites and things. And the Yilgarn and the Pilbara has done this a few times. And when it's opened up, it's formed a basin. And when it's closed up again, it's sort of all folded. And there's a lot of big faults which make a really good plumbing system. So it's been a pretty neglected area for a long time. There was up to only a few years ago, there was really only one major discovery there, and that's the Abra lead zinc deposit, but that's been around for like 30 odd years. So there hasn't been a lot of work there. I did a little bit of work up there with Western Mining in the 90s, and our Whaleshark project sits off the end of that, but undercover. But the actual outcropping bits of the Capricorn Origin are really underexplored. And so what got me sort of re-interested in that area was when Geoscience Australia put out this Nickel-Copper-PGE atlas in 2016. And it's what led Chalice into the southwest to make the nickel discovery at Julimar. And I had this idea about the Bangemall area because there's all these dolerite sills, intrusive units within the basin, and they're the same age as what you see at the West Musgraves where the Nebo and Babel discoveries were. And you've also got these big faults, these big crustal scale faults that are like the plumbing system for fluid that could come up. So I had this idea that the Bangemall could be an area that was very interesting for nickel copper PGEs. And there were some regional indicators. There was regional geochem anomalism. There were these sills, these big structures. So 2019, I sort of did a real big desktop study of the Bangemall and said, okay, what are the areas that are most prospective for nickel copper PGEs, and pegged some tenements. And at the time, there was no one else there. It was basically vacant ground. There was a few tenements held by guys that had been looking for manganese, but they weren't sort of very active anymore. I think Galena Mining might have just sort of taken over Abra and started doing some work there, but we could have had whatever we wanted.
We're talking about one end of the Gascoyne to the other end, right?
Yeah, so you took your way in the east. The Capricorn Origin goes way over past the Great Northern Highway, past like to Newman, pretty much over to where like Capricorn are, and then it goes right over to the coast where we are at Onslow. So it's this massive big belt of rocks, and there's some bits of it that are granitic rocks, the actual Gascoyne province, where people like Dreadnought and that are. And then there's a couple of basins. There's what they call the Edmund Basin, and then there's the Collier Basin on top of that. And then next to that is the Ashburton Basin. But that's actually part of the older sequence. That's part of the Pilbara sort of stuff. So it's really that sort of Gascoyne province, Edmund Basin, Collier Basin. That was the area that I was interested in. And like I say, so after we pegged the ground in 2019, suddenly we're like completely surrounded. First Quantum were up there, Tech were up there, Dreadnought picked up a whole heap of ground, and a whole heap of other people. So suddenly it was like, oh wow, like what's going on here? There's so many people. And obviously what's driven that, I guess probably in the last 18 months or so, is Hastings are developing their rare earth project at Yangibana, which has been around for a long time, but it was actually originally called Gifford Creek, I think. It's been known about. I actually went and looked at some uranium rare earth things when I was working for Western Mining up in that Gascoyne province as well, back in the 90s. But people like Dreadnought picking up that ground around Hastings and then making some new carbonatite discoveries. And now you've got Lanthanine, who are sort of each end of Hastings making discoveries. And then there's a few other people picked up ground. And so we started going, well, it looks like aside from this nickel copper PGE potential, there could be some other stuff on the Edmund Basin tenements as well. So we flew a magnetic and radiometric survey at one of our projects that we call Dooley Downs. It's about 30 kilometres north of Mount Augustus. And we just flew detailed mags and radiometrics. And when we got the radiometrics back, in an area that's supposed to be just all like folded sediments, suddenly there's like these big blobs of uranium and thorium anomalism. And you go, hang on, why? What's going on there? Something a bit different there. And then when you look at the magnetics as well, those uranium and thorium anomalies are coincident with like a magnetic low. And if you look at any of the stuff that Dreadnought's been putting out, you get these magnetic lows with like a little mag-high rim around it, and that's very indicative of carbonatite. So we were starting to go, hang on, this is a bit strange, because to date, all the carbonatites have been found in that Gascoyne province with all the granites. So for us, if we find something like that in the Edmund Basin or in the Collier Basin, then that's pretty significant. It opens up like a whole nother area. And the ages are right. The Edmund Basin, I think, is sort of like 1500 million years old, and the Collier Basin's a bit younger, 1100, 1000, million years old. The carbonatite's quite young, so the timing is right. They could be intruding into the Edmund Basin and the Collier Basin as well. So that's interesting. So we went out on the ground last week. I went to a couple of the best looking anomalies. One of them is really interesting. It's a very large anomaly that we put out in our presentation. It's like 5 k's long by about a k wide, and it's all mapped as sediment, but in the mags it looks like an intrusion. And on the ground it's actually a hill. It's like a folded hill of sediment, and then there's a bit of drainage in the middle, so like the hill's sort of been broken like that. So we went down and had a look inside, but it's all just like alluvium stuff. But that's where it looks like there could be like an intrusion that has caused the fold almost. So it's sitting underneath it. So that's pretty interesting. And then another area where there's a really strong uranium thorium anomaly with a bit of a circular mag low. We went out there, and it was just sort of like sheet wash and stuff. But there was lots of ironstone, lots of real heavy dark ironstone. So we took a few samples of that and we put them into the lab and see what sort of numbers we get from those. We also took a scintillometer, nice, real modern scintillometer, and you could just walk across the ground. It would start like giving you like high uranium numbers, so we're sort of in the right spot. So
like a like those things you see in the movies when they walk towards a uranium.
Yeah, exactly. It's a scintillometer, right? So what we're going to do probably next year, maybe when it cools down a bit up there, I think about doing ground mags to home in on those sort of mag anomalies a bit more.
Yeah.
And probably with a scintillometer at the same time.
Yeah.
Just walk. The scintillometers now these days are great. They've got GPS and it'll track it. So you just set it on record like you do with a magnetometer, and just walk.
Okay.
And then at the end of the day download it, and then suddenly you've got a map of like potassium, thorium, uranium or whatever. So yeah, that's probably what we'll do there. And then not too much cover there, so we might be able to even get like a little auger rig or something out there and see if we can punch through the material and see what's underneath it. So, but
not much cover there.
No, it's it's mostly outcrop. That's the thing. It's outcropping. So a lot of the sort of real simple stuff like stream seeds and soils should work pretty well up there. And you can see a lot of the geology when you're driving from Mount Augustus out to Dooley Downs. There's this, range of hills, and you can see all the units. You can see sediments and then a dolerite like this in the hill, So